Hello there, fellow explorer, and welcome to episode number 7 of the Vintage Pilot School podcast, where you can join me in my quest to learn to fly an aeroplane. Today, I will be sending you positive sound waves concerning two main topics: air transport safety and space travel. Jingle, please. Today I'm recording from my usual walk-in cupboard without any daylight shining through, but let's imagine my view is not blocked by a brick wall to keep the Spanish heat out. Instead, let's suppose we both have a stunning view over the beautiful Albufera lake close by my current residence in Valencia. If you haven't been, you really should. The Albufera is part of a very large nature preservation area right outside the city centre. It's quite a tranquil and peaceful place to go for a walk, and it would, hypothetically, form the perfect, non-obtrusive background for some chatter about aviation and a few remotely related topics. So let's pretend we're both in a shady spot under a palm tree amidst the rice fields. I've been wanting to record this episode for a few days now, but some sort of allergic reaction has been keeping my nose blocked and my vocal cords obstructed. I don't know if I might be allergic to palm trees. I hope not, because there's rather many of them around here. In fact, there hasn't really been any flying for me in the past few weeks, not because of the weather, because we've been blessed with a very mild early spring here in Valencia, but I've been terribly busy with work and I should urgently focus on studying more procedures and flying theory. Otherwise, I might never get my license, and I would very much like to be a real boy, as Pinocchio would put it. Now, it's not because I've not done any flying in a while that we can't talk about it. A very similar approach that the teenage Thomas used to take when it came to making love with lady friends. Perhaps it's best to first tackle a slightly more serious topic, in light of the recent events that shook the world of commercial aviation. And by events, I do mean the two Boeing 787 MAX aircraft that fell out of the sky not so long ago. Both a Lion Air and an Ethiopian Airlines jetliner suffered fatal crashes over a 5-month period. Now, you, as a listener, are a person from the distant or not so distant future, so you might have more info than I do, but as I'm recording this in April, it seems that some sort of faulty stall countering mechanism had been designed and implemented wrongly. Now, the discussion to me, as an outsider with very, very limited knowledge, is not whether the manufacturer should have taken more precautions or whether governments and aviation authorities around the globe should have grounded all the Boeing 787 MAX planes straight away after that first crash. I think that time will tell who should have intervened at which point in this sequence of events, but at this time, all we can do really is speculate. The one thing that is quite clear, though, is that the reasons for the accidents are most likely to do with a technological aid or a means to assist the pilots electronically. And this stirs up the whole debate about manual versus automated flying. Should we hand more control to pilots, or do we want to move towards a future where flying is as automated as technologically possible? A very similar debate is starting to enter our daily lives under the form of increasingly self-driving and autonomous vehicles, and sometimes this can lead to difficult dilemmas. Do we want a self-driving car to stop us from being able to drive too fast, for example? Or do we want our car to refuse us to let us get in if we've had a drink too much? People are really still hesitant to put their trust in computer code, sometimes rightly so, but more often not. It does seem that the technical debate is mostly taking place behind the fancy glass doors of tech firms, though, and that is a bit of a worrying thought. In the case of flying on the whole, though, automation and computer assistance have really only helped to make flying on the whole a lot safer. This is not just my opinion. I can back it up with cold, hard statistics, and there's no better place to find aggregate and undeniably true statistics than Wikipedia. Now, I would like you to have a think for a moment. Which popular mode of transport do you think is the most unsafe? In fact, there is a very, very clear winner, or loser, depending on your view, and it's the motorcycle, by a wide, wide margin. No matter how you look at it from a statistical perspective, whether you choose to go off kilometres driven or per journey or per hour travelled, the good old motorbike is by far more dangerous than any other means of land, water or air transportation. But of course, most people travel by car rather than by motorcycle on a day-to-day basis, and that also reveals some interesting statistics. If you take fatal accidents per kilometre as your benchmark, for example, you are 60 times more likely to die in a car crash than in a plane. Now, I know that that's cheating a bit because planes cover a lot of ground in one flight and most people travel by plane only once or twice a year. So we could have a look at, for example, the fatality rate per journey. But even then, planes are actually only 3 times as unsafe as cars, with a mere 117 fatal accidents per billion flights. That's not a lot of accidents for a lot of flights. Now, I'm aware that private aviation, or general aviation as it's called, with those small engine planes, is inherently a lot more dangerous than commercial flying, because weekend warriors like myself are not as well trained, and the chance of both technical and human errors are significantly higher. This actually reminds me of the very first flight I ever did in a small aeroplane, and that was at the airfield of White Waltham, a beautiful place just outside London, not too far from Heathrow Airport, and the local flight school there offered 6-hour emergency courses to partners of pilots to learn how to put down the plane in case of emergency, so for example a stroke of their partner, and how to communicate impending doom over the radio. Just one more statistical, fun or morbid fact. The most unsafe mode of transport ever designed was the space shuttle. If you were due to take a spin in that flying death machine, even just once, there would be a 1.7% chance your children would be cashing in on your life insurance policy. Now, speaking of space shuttles, oh, what a coincidence, I was just about to take things into space this time. Because flying is one thing, but rockets are a completely different kettle of propulsion-powered fish. I recently watched a movie that features an actor whose name I do not wish to pronounce, for the simple fact that he is considered a sex symbol by the female half of the world population, and I fundamentally disagree because I'm a man and I don't think he's that strong or handsome or intelligent at all. You know who I'm talking about. His name sounds quite similar to Bryan Flossthing. I was first going to go with Tosking, but I was not sure if that would make it past the iTunes profanity filter, so I decided against it. Now, the man is a fine actor, but I disagree with the endless adoration that Bryan keeps receiving for reciting lines that were written especially for him by a team of scriptwriters. Anyway, why am I telling you all this? Well, first, because this is a fight I'm sure I can still win, if only enough people realise that they've been blinded by Bryan's perfect set of abdominal muscles. And secondly, because if you watch that movie, which I still recommend, although I would also suggest you don't pay too much for it because that would only give Bryan the opportunity to retire early, spend 16 hours a day in the gym and grooming his body hair so he would continue to look allegedly handsome and give us ordinary fellas no chance in life. And now I've lost myself in a subclause. Rephrase. What I wanted to say, if you want to watch that movie, I can still recommend it. You will find it on the internet. It's something to do with space, Bryan Flossthing, not that difficult to put things together. And then you'll get a sense of what ridiculously basic technology was in place in the 1960s to get astronauts up into space and back again. In fact, all of those computers that were on board the Apollo spacecraft in the 60s would now easily fit into the first smartphone you ever owned. And it might sound a little strange, but after that first burst of lunar exploration, there was a bit of a void for a few decades with some interesting international projects like the International Space Station, but without any real plan to have mankind set foot on other planets. But thanks to our favourite lunatic billionaire Elon Musk, exploration of the planets is back on the agenda. In fact, Musk's company SpaceX is planning to be headed for Mars within the next 6 years. Now, that might be a little bit of a close call, but significant progress has been made indeed. And technology, of course, has improved along. It's come a very, very long way since those 1960s and 70s Apollo missions. As you might have heard, the rockets that the company is using in its current test flights are designed to be reused almost in their entirety, and that is quite remarkable. The US space shuttle was originally designed for reusing as well, but in practice things didn't quite work out, especially those side boosters. Now, the side boosters, that's those 3 rockets with extra fuel that the space shuttle needs to escape the Earth's gravity and go into orbit. And, well, what about them? They were a little bit impractical because they would always get disconnected once they ran out of fuel and they would fall back to Earth and crash. Now, the SpaceX rocket boosters are rather different. After a few minor hiccups, let's say, they are now consistently able to land back on a very tiny landing platform on Earth. That's quite different from those early space shuttles and typical rockets, who jettisoned their rocket boosters as soon as they ran out of fuel. I've included a link to a recent landing of SpaceX rocket boosters on the podcast page. It's really beautiful to watch, especially if you consider that it's basically just a stick falling back to Earth and then miraculously landing back on a tiny marked spot. Quite remarkable, I dare say, and far more precise than even my best landings in the small Piper Warrior that I'm learning to fly. That will do for episode 7. As always, love letters, hate mail, and anything in between is most welcome. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Facebook page and to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you usually get your podcasts from. And share it with your friends, family, housemates, or your pet turtle. For now, goodbye.